Hey girls. Thanks so much for having such a great session last week. It was really nice to see all of you. Um, and to see that you guys have been doing a really good job. Um, we are going to be moving past World War One, and we're going to be looking at the Roaring Twenties. So keep your eyes peeled for a quiz. Um, but we're going to be looking at the Roaring Twenties. When you think of Roaring Twenties, you think of Prohibition, maybe you think of Flappers, you think of The Great Gatsby, stuff like that. So I hope you have like a kind of an idea of what the 20s are like. Um, we're going to be looking at people wanting things to go back to normal after the war. We're going to be looking at people really becoming fearful of communism, the Red Scare. And this is something, and it's important because it's something that melts into our society today. Anti-immigration feelings, anti-immigration policy, isolationism. We're going to be looking at the presidency of Warren G. Harding, um, and how he wanted the American people to feel safe and to calm down after the war. And in reality, he used their fear, as an opportunity to not as an opportunity, but ultimately his administration was plagued by scandal. And this kind of just shows us how we can't, at this point, Americans were fearful after the war. They're fearful of communism, and now they're fearful of their own democracy. Um, we're going to be looking at how production is booming at this time. Right? You know how people say "Okay, boomer"? It's because um, people grew up in a time where the economy was great, everything was perfect, and they can't relate to, growing up or, looking for jobs in a time where the economy isn't at its best. We're going to be looking at the urban sprawl. So, with that being said, and without further ado, let's take a look into the 1920s and the 30s. Okay. As a warm up, right? After World War One, what do people want to do most? They want to get back to work, see their families, and kind of just relax. Um, so the United States wants to seek normality and isolation after the war. The standard of living soars amid labor unrest and immigration quotas, and we're going to see how, like I just said, the Harding administration is plagued by scandal. All right, problems that we face right after the war. Right, we're afraid of communism. We don't trust foreigners, and we are hesitant to really interact with other countries. Oh, let me just put this in regular slideshow. Oh God, come on. Oh, whatever. Okay. So post-war trends. You would think I couldn't work a computer. Okay. No. Okay. But can you hear me? Okay, whatever. We'll just do it this way. Okay. So, war leaves Americans feeling exhausted. The debate over the League of Nations divides them. The economy is adjusting. The cost of living doubles, meaning it's even more expensive to just exist and live in the U.S. now. The farm and the factory orders are down because they're no longer providing for the war effort. Soldiers take jobs from women and minorities, right? So all of the white soldiers come home and they resume working in factories, which kicks out your women who had just joined the workforce and kicks out your minorities who didn't have the first chance to work in these factories. Nativism is prejudice against foreign-born people. Okay, so basically, if you were born in the United States, you think that people who immigrate to the United States or are born not in the U.S., you think that they are inferior to you. Isolationism is pulling away from world affairs. Basically, the U.S. this time wants to distance itself from the rest of the world after the war. This becomes very popular at this time, as the rest of the world is also healing from World War One. And here's the Red Scare. So, communism is an economic political system. It is a single party government. Um, it is a single party government. It's ruled by a dictator. There's no private property. You learned about this last year. Um, Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks, they had set up the communist state in Russia. Um, the United States Communist Party forms, and some industrial workers of the world join. Bombs are mounted to the government, businesses, and people are terrified of a conspiracy. Um, and American attorneys, and American law, American officials are starting to take action. The Palmer raids, right? So this is named after where are we at? Okay, this is named after Mitchell Palmer. Um, they hunt down communists and socialists and anarchists. An anarchist is someone who opposes any form of government. So the Palmer raids trample civil rights, and they fail to find any evidence of conspiracy. This is problematic because obviously the people have the right to express themselves and to have an opinion, and the Palmer raids are kind of violating, your civil rights. Sacco and Vanzetti. So the Red Scare feeds this fear of foreigners, ruins reputations. Sacco and Vanzetti were two Italian immigrants who were anarchists, right? They didn't believe in any form of government, and they were arrested. They were charged with robbery, murder. Trial does not prove them guilty. However, the jury finds them guilty, and there are widespread protests in the United States. Sacco and Vanzetti are then executed. Okay. And so then people are even becoming more fearful now because the gravity of the situation. As always in America, we're going to see anti-immigrant attitudes. We're going to see that there are fewer unskilled jobs available, so less immigrants are needed. Immigrants and anarchists and socialists or communists. That's how we should think of it, okay? So that's what we're going to see. And if you see in this picture on the left, right, it pretty much represents Uncle Sam, who is representing all of America, and an immigrant who is holding, poverty, disease, very, one of his bags says anarchy. And they're pretty much saying, no, you can't come in here. Look at what you're bringing. And this was the idea this was the sentiment around immigration. So that's pretty much what we see there. Then we start to limit immigration. We see that the Klan rises again, the Ku Klux Klan, and bigots are using anti-communism to harass groups that aren't like themselves. The KKK opposes blacks, Catholics, Jews, immigrants. Seriously? Sorry, that was my puppy. And in 1924, there are 4.5 million members. And the Klan controls many states' politics, and violence leads to less power. So the Klan rises again during a time where, think of it this way, girls. I mean, anytime that the society in a state is weak, it is very easy for oppressive power or oppressive groups to come to power. The quota system. So this sets a maximum number of immigrants that can enter the U.S. This is a way that they try to limit immigration, and it really reduces European immigration. It discriminates against Southern Eastern European countries, and it prohibits Japanese immigration because and this causes there to be a rift between the U.S. and Japan. And this does not apply to the Western Hemisphere, as many Canadians and Mexicans are granted entry to the United States. So it's basically a way to discriminate and to keep other cultures out of the country by law. Post-war labor issues. The government doesn't allow strikes in wartime. And so therefore, when it ends, and in 1919, there are over 3,000 strikes. Employers are against raises and unions, and they label strikers as communists. So now everyone in society who's undesirable is just being called a communist. There was a Boston police strike. Calvin Coolidge ended the strike and replaced strikers with new policemen, right? So that's not how it's supposed to work. Basically, if you speak out against, the government, or if you try to negotiate your wages, you get replaced. It's not how it's supposed to work. We have the steel mill strike, and in 1919, steel workers go on strike. Companies use force, and then they talk negotiations later. Wilson appeals it, and the strike ends, and they end up getting an 8-hour workday. Okay, we have the coal miners' strike. John L. Lewis becomes the head of the United Mine Workers of America, and he leads a strike. And ultimately, miners receive a 27% wage increase, and he becomes a national hero. The labor movement starts to decline and lose appeal. Union members drop from 5 million to 3.5 million. Less than 1% of the African Americans make up the labor union, and there are just over 3% of whites in the unions. Okay. Oops. Oh, am I frozen? That's not good. Okay. All right. I guess that's where we will end today. So that's not working. Attached, I have your worksheets that I want you to do, that I want you to read and complete and submit. So good luck, girls. Let me know if you need any help.